Hello everyone, my name is Ashish and welcome to this Tag Instance channel. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss how to do the validation in a Spring Boot application or how to implement the validation in a Spring Boot application. And here we are going to use the Hibernate Validator. So Hibernate Validator is one of the famous validator to validate the Java bean in Java. So before starting the lecture, I am going to discuss like some about a validating. So let's see like what is a validating. So here the validating is a common task that occurs throughout the application layer, like from the presentation layer to the persistence layer. And often the same validation logic is implemented in each layer, which is a time consuming and error prone. And also we can get a duplicate code. To avoid the duplication of these validations, the developers often bundle the validation logic directly into the domain model. So here we are going to implement the validation logic in a domain model, and then we are going to see how we can duplicate this validation logic in the every layer, right? So for this, we are going to use the Hibernate validator. And the Hibernate validator like provides a certain annotation by which we can validate. Yeah, so these are the some of the like the notations at the rate length. Let's say that we have to check the length of the data, then we can check by using at the rate length, and here we can pass in the argument the mean and the maximum value. So it is going to check if the string length matches the range or not. So in the same way, if we want to check the maximum value, then we can use at the rate max, and here we need to pass the value as the argument. Then here it is going to check that the value should be less than or equal to this like value here we are passing. If the value is like greater than the value, then we will get a validation error. In the same way, if we want to check with the minimum value, then we can use at the rate mean annotation. So at the rate not null is to check the value should not be null. In the same way, for empty, we can check by at the rate not empty. And in the same way, if we have to check the range, then we can use at the rate range, and the mean and the maximum value we have to pass in the argument. And in the same way, if we want to check with the size, then we can use at the rate size, and here we need to pass the mean and the maximum value. So value should be between this range. Then it will not give the validation error. Otherwise it will give the validation error, right? In the same way, if we want to check the string that it should be in an email format, then we have one annotation with the name at the rate email. So it is going to check the string is conformed to the email address specification. If the string is not like matching the email address specification, then it is going to give us the validation error. So these are like some of the annotation which we can use to validate the Java bean, right? So now here I am going to here I'm going to create a Spring Boot application to show means to see how we can implement the Hibernate validator, right? So for this, I'm going to use the Spring Initializer, and then we are going to create one Spring Boot application. So this is our Maven project and Java as a language, and here I'm going to use 2.5.2 version. So here you have to keep one thing in mind, that starting with the Spring Boot version 2.3, you need to explicitly add a Spring Boot starter validation dependencies in your pom.xml. If you are using the Spring Boot version lesser than 2.3, then you don't need to explicitly add the Spring Boot starter validation in your pom.xml. It will be automatically like imported with a imported the with the Spring starter. So here we are using the 2.5.2 version, so we need to explicitly add the validation, the like dependencies inside our pom.xml, right? So let's change our group name. Let's put the group name as stag instance, and artifact name is same as your project name. So let's skip Hibernate validation. All right. So description will be same. So package I am jar, and here Java 8 I will use. You can use Java 11 also. Now let's add the dependencies. So first I will use Spring Wave. Then I will use dev tool. So here I am using dev tool to restart my server as I do any changes. And the next dependencies I will add as a Spring Data JPA to interact with my like database. And I'm going to use MySQL database. So for that, I'm going to add MySQL driver. And here, guys, I'm using 2.5.2 version of Spring Boot. So here I need to explicitly add the Hibernate Validator, right? So let's add, this is the bean validation with the Hibernate Validator, right? So we need to add it explicitly inside our pom.xml. So these are the dependencies I have added. Now let's generate our project. So now I need to extract it. So go to the folder and directly you can extract it here. All right. And now I need to import this inside my Eclipse. So go to the file, open project, do directory, and here you can select your extracted project and finish this. So guys, I am able to import my Hibernate validation project inside my Eclipse. And now here I am going to create the different package, right? So inside my Java class, here inside the main Java class, and here we have the Hibernate validator application class, and this is the main class, right? So here I'm going to create a couple of like the packages. So let's create all the packages first. Yeah. So first I'm going to create a model package. So let's create another package, that is repository. Now I'm going to create one more package, that is service package. So inside the service package, we are going to create our service class. And another package I'm going to create as a controller. So inside the controller package, we are going to add our controller class. So these are the four packages I have added. So now I'm going to create our model class. So here what we are going to do, so here we are going to create one user model, and the user model will contain the user name, the user ID, the user email, and the user city. And then we are going to save this like user data to our MySQL database. And then we are going to validate the data which we will pass from the Postman, and we are going to see how we can means how we can validate by using a like Hibernate validator, right? So let's go to the model package, and here I'm going to create one like the Java bean or the model class with the name user model or something user. So this user class will contain some attributes, let's say like user ID, all right, something UID. So this is the user ID, and the next attribute I'm going to keep is as a string uname. So this is the username. So next attribute I will keep as a email. So this is the user email, all right. And the next I'm going to keep as a uct. So this is the user city, all right. So these are the four attributes I have added to my user class, and here I want the user ID as a primary key. So for that I will use at the rate ID annotation to mark this as a primary key, and here I will mark this user class at the entity. So that in the so that yeah, so this is my entity class. So as I start my application, it is going to create the table with the name user, and this UID, uname, uemail, uct will be go as a column. all right, and I want the auto generated. So for that, here I can use the generated value annotation to auto generate the ID for the user. So these are the four attributes I have added to my entity class. Now I want to create the constructor for this, and also the getter and the setter. So let's create the getter and the setter first. Select all, generate it. Now I need to create the constructor also. Let's say a parametric constructor. So go to the source, generate the constructor. All right. So guys, here I have added our entity class with the name user, and here it has the four attributes: the user ID, name, email, and city, right? So now I'm going to create my repository class. So repository class will be interface, like basically it will be like interface with the name user something, keep it as a repository, all right. So here I'm going to extend this user repository with a JPA repository. So we have a JPA repository. So JPA repository like provide all the CRUD operations, all the basic CRUD operations. So here I need to pass the model class name, that is user. So we have to import this, and as the ID we need to pass the type of my primary ID. So it was like integer, right? So ID was integer type, so here I need to pass integer. All right. So here I have like created a user repository interface, which is extending the JP repository so that we can interact with the database, and the JP repository provide the CRUD operations like save, and also we can like fetch all the information. For that we are using the JP repository. So now here I am going to create one service class. So this is my service package. So inside the service package, I'm going to create one like service class with the name, let's say user service. So to make this as a service, we have to annotate this with the @service. All right. So here inside the service class, I'm going to create one method to save the user. So let's create one method to save the user, and the return type I'm going to keep it as a user itself. So let's keep the method name as save user, and here it is yeah, so in the argument it is going to take one user object, user, right? So this should contain some return type. So here I am going to use like the user repository here. So here I'm going to use the user repository. So let me auto wire. So user repository, let's create the instance of this user repository and mark this at the auto wire. All right. So now I am going to, so here I'm going to call the save method of a JPA repository to save this user to my MySQL database. So directly we can use user repository here, and directly yeah, so here you can see that we have a couple of CRUD operations which are like provided by the JP repository, like get by ID. If we want to get the data by ID, then you can use this method. If you want to save the entity, then you can directly use the save method, and also you want to count, then you can use the count method and all. And we have the find all method to get all the data, all the entities or the object available in your database, right? So here for now we are going to use the save method, and in the argument we are going to pass the user object. So here it is going to save this user to my database. So this is my user like service class. So we have created one model class, and we have marked with the entity. we have the repository, that like the jpo repository. Now I'm going to create my controller class or a rest controller. So go to the controller package, and here you have to create one more class, let's say with the name user controller. All right, so this will be my rest controller. So for that you have to mark with the @rest controller. All right, and I'm going to use the request mapping for the global like URL. So @request mapping, and here we can pass the URL. So for this I'm going to keep a stag instance. All right, so in stag instance is my like the root URL, so I'm using with, yeah, so this is my controller class. Now I need to create the endpoint, right? So let's create one endpoint so that I can call my like service method. So public, and here I'm going to use the response entity. So here I'm going to pass user, add user. All right, so this is going to take a request body. So here I'm going to use a request body annotation to take the user object from the request body. So we need to import this. Yeah, so this is my the endpoint, and now here I need to, so now I need to call the save method which we have implemented just in our service class, right? So for this we have to create the instance of my service like user service. So for that so for here I'm going to use like auto wire this user service here. User service, so auto wire the user service, and with this like reference variable we can call the save method, right? So user, so let's create user, store this value user service, and here with the user service, yeah, and here with the user service we can call the save method. Sorry, so instance name was user service, right? Yeah, so inside the service class we have a save method, and here we need to pass the user object directly, entity object. So this is going to call our save user method of the service class, and here we can simply return as a new response entity. All right, and here we need to pass the create user. So let's pass the create user. All right, and in the status I'm going to pass uh, http status as I'm going to pass as a created. Yeah, so here it is going to send the response back as a created response, and this is and also it is going to pass the created user information in a JSON format to the user, right? So this is my the endpoint. So this endpoint we need to call with the post method. So for that we can use the post mapping, and also I want to call this with some URL, let's say save user. So we can pass directly the URL inside the post mapping annotation argument, right? So this way I have created one like controller class also. So let me save this class. All right. So we have one controller class, we have one model class, and the service class, and the repository class, right? So till yeah, so till here we have implemented. So now let's check that whether my endpoint is working correctly or not. So for that we need to start this application. So go to the main class, right click, run as a Java application. So here, if you will see, we got some error saying attribute no embedded data source could be configured. Let me check. Okay, let me check it and then I will come back to you. Okay, all right, guys. Here I have like forgot to update my application.properties file, right? So that's why we are getting the error of the data source. So let's update our like properties file. Yeah. So this is my application.properties file, and here I am using, yeah. So here I am using the MySQL driver. So I have already uh, return the like prototype. So here I'm going to copy and paste it inside my application.properties file. And here you can see that I am using, and here I am using the MySQL driver. So we need to load the driver class name. So com.mysql jdbc driver. And here we need to pass the URL. So this is my URL, and here I am using the validation schema inside my MySQL database, right? So this is my database validation. So here we need to provide, and here my username is root and password of my this, and here I want to show the SQL inside my console. So for that I'm doing true, and this is auto DDL as update, and here I'm using the dialect as this, right? MSQL 5 dialect. So let me save this, and again, and here if you will see, now I need to again start my server. So run as a Java application. So I believe now it should start. Yeah, all right. So here you can see that our Tomcat has started with the port number 8080. So now we are going to test with the Postman, like the third party API testing tool, that whether our whether our endpoint is working fine or not. So let's go to our Postman, and here guys, yeah. So here we need to write our so go to our controller class, and let's copy this request URL, the global request URL here, so that we can double check the whether it is correct, right? And also we have to pass the endpoint URL. So save user is my endpoint URL, right? And here in the body you can see that I am passing the U name, and here I'm not passing the UID because the UID is auto generated, because I'm using at the rate generated value annotation in my in my like entity model class. So here I'm passing name, email, and city, right? So name is Ashish, email is Ashish, and guys, you can see that this is not in a email format, right? Although it will get saved, because here we are not using the validation, right? And here we are using the city as Ranchi. So let's keep the full name as a Ashish Bhagat. All right. Now let's go, and this is the post method, right? So now let's hit the send button. So here guys, you can see that I have successfully added this user like entity inside my database, and we got the response as this is like added to my database with the 201 like created like response. And here if you'll observe that we are able to save with the email, and here you can see that it is not in an email format also. And here we are able to pass with the any length or any with the username, right? So now we are going to see how we can validate this email, and also we are going to see how we can validate this name also, right? So now let's go to our Eclipse, and now we are going to see how we can validate this email and the name, the username. So for that we have to use the annotation. So go to your user like model entity class, and here you can use the annotation. So let's say that for the username, I want that user name should not be null, right? So this should not be null or empty, right? So this is the one condition, that the username should not be null or empty. And the second condition I want to place as the username should have at least four character, right? Yeah, so these are the two condition I have to validate with the username. So for that, what we can use, so for the first condition, the username should not be null or empty. So for this we can use not empty annotation, right? So not empty annotation is going to validate that username should not be passed like empty. And the second condition, have the username should have at least four character. It means that we can use at the rate size here annotation, right? And inside the argument, what we can do, inside the argument we can keep the minimum value as 4. So it means that minimum the 4 characters should be present inside my uname, or otherwise, right, otherwise we can show the message as we can write here, that user name must be of 4 character, must be at least of, four character, right? So these are the two annotation we can use to fulfill this two condition. Now let's see the conditions for the email. Now yeah, so in the same way, the email should not be empty, right? Email should not be empty or null. So this is the first condition. And the second condition, I want to pass that email should be a valid format, right? Yeah, so here I want that email should be in a valid format, and also the email should not be empty or null. So for that, what we can do, so for the first condition we can use simply at the rate not empty annotation, and to validate with the email format we can simply use the email like annotation, right? So here the email annotation is going to ensure that the string we are passing in the email should be in a email format specification, otherwise we will get a validation error, right? So this is the two annotation we can use for this field. And now for the city I'm going to keep it as it is, right? So this is the two annotation you have to add inside your model class. And now inside your controller class, inside your endpoint argument, right? So this is your add user, and here you are like receiving the user object from your request body, right? So here you have to use at the rate valid, valid annotation to validate your like user request object, right? So this is the two like changes you have to do. And now you have to create one more class for like returning the validation response. So for that, what I will do, I will create one more package. Let's say with the name something exception. All right. So inside this exception package, I'm going to create one more class. Let's say with the name validation handler, right? So this is my like validation handler class, and this is my validation handler class. So let me stop the server, otherwise it will get restarted as I do the save, because we are using the Spring like dev tool, right? Yeah. So this is the yeah, so here we are so here we have created the validation handler class, and we have to annotate this class with a controller advice annotation. With the controller error, yeah, so controller advice annotation make this class as a common for handling all the exceptions, right? So this is at the rate control advice. And now I need to extend this class with the uh, response entity, with the response entity exception handler, right? So this is the class I am extending our like validation handler, and here I need to override one method. So let's override one method, something with the name handler method argument. So let me see, handler method argument resolver, not valid. Handler method argument not valid, right? So this is the method, and here, all right, so let me write all this specification for this method here. So this is like protected, or let me do one thing, protected response entity. So I will keep as a response entity, and here I will keep as an object. All right, and my method name handle method argument not valid. All right, and here I am going to take the argument. So here it is going to take the argument as a method argument. Yeah, so here it is going to take the method argument not valid exception ex, and also http header, I believe. Yeah, http headers. All right, and also it is going to take http status. So let's keep it as a status. All right, and also the wave request and request. All right, so this is my the method like prototype. All right, so we need to add the return, so let me add it. Yeah, so now I need to like handle the exception. So for that, what we can do, we can create simply a map. All right, so here we can pass the first as the string, and the second value I will keep as a string also. So this is the errors, and here we can use the new hash map. All right, so this is the new hash map, and now I need to ex dot get binding result. Yeah, so we have the method get binding result. So it takes the all the result, and then it takes all the errors from by the method get all errors, right? And then here we can use the for each loop, and the get all errors will take in the array, and then we can use the for each loop here, and here we can use like the errors, and then we can iterate the error one by one, and then we can store this in a, let's say, in the field name. The error dot get field name. Okay, so I have to transform this in the field field error like this. I have to convert this to the field error, and I can use the get. So we have to import this field error also. All right. So now I can get the get method. So let's say I can get the get field. So we have the get field method now. So it is storing in the field name. So in the same way, I need to store the message. So just copy it and change the message, and simply we can get the error from here, like error dot get default message. Yeah, so default message will get the message for you from inside the error, and we are getting the field by converting to the field error type, right? So this is the field name and this is the message name, and now I need to put this inside my hash map. All right, so let's give the key as field field name, and the value as error, uh, field name and the message. So this is errors, right? Yeah, so here we are restoring the field name and the value as the message. Yeah, and we are then returning this as a new response entity, as a new response entity as the object, and here we are passing the errors directly, and then http request status we can write with the bad request, so that we are getting a bad request we can show directly in my response, right? So this is the handler class I have created, right? So here we are using the handler like method argument not valid, and here we are creating the hash map, and right, and here I'm extracting, means iterating all these errors we are getting inside my method argument validate exception, and I am iterating one by one, and then I am taking or fetching the field name from the error and the message, and then storing in a field name and the message, and I am making this field name as the key and the message as a value, and passing in the error in the errors map, and then I'm returning to this, right? Yeah, so this is the changes we have to do. Yeah, so by this way we can show the error in our response. So let's save this. Now let's again start our server, run as Java application. All right, so here you, if you will see here, we have putted the condition, the first condition, the minimum the username should be up at least a 4 character, right? So our server has started. So let's go to the Postman, and here you can see that at least the username is of the 4 character, but our like email is of not of the email format. So let's see if we're sending the request, what happens. So yeah, so here you can see that as I send the request, we got a response as the must be well formatted email, right? So this is a response we are getting in a JSON format, and here we are getting 400 bad requests, right? Because here our email is not in a well email format. Now let's add asis@gmail.com. Now let's hit the request. So here you can see that we are able to store this user entity inside my database, and here we are able to create one entity. Now the second I have kept it as the username should be at least of 4 characters. So here we are passing 3 character as, right? Now let's check that whether we are getting the validation error or not. So here you can see that we are getting the validation error as user must name must be at least 4 characters. So how we are getting? So we are getting because inside my model class, as I have shown you, like I have added this size as 4, and here it is checking that the size is of 3 character. So here you have to show this error as the user must name be of 4 character, right? In the same way, if we will keep the email, right, so it will give us the like error. So yeah, so guys, here you have like you have seen how you will use the Hibernate validator to validate your to validate your like Java Bean like model class, and you can like validate your data by using the Hibernate validator. Thanks and have a nice day, guys.